Hello and welcome back to this damnful idealistic crusade. This will be the latest in my seemingly never-ending series of Laserdisc collection videos and updates. I've actually got a number of discs and was already working on putting together a new video because I had accumulated enough discs to make one, but I had to do this one separately and do two videos because I got an email from a lovely follower of the channel. Michael Smith just was apparently parting out pieces of his collection and sent me an email asking me if I'd be interested in a number of titles, particularly classics and silents, and of course I was interested. So we worked out a deal, and he shipped me a gigantic box of some beautiful LD titles, all of which are much more on the uncommon side. A lot of really hard to find titles. A lot of these, because they were later restorations of silence, they are coming in towards the tail end of the LD era. So a number from the mid to late 90s, and making them not just actually very good versions of these silent titles and some of the more modern restorations, and some that the later DVDs were based on or copied, but they themselves are very uncommon, rarer titles, and some are indeed late releases. So it was a wonderful surprise. So all thanks to Michael Smith and for making this happen and sending me just a wonderful giant box of laser goodness and some really fantastic titles that, to be honest, I never really thought I would come across on the format unless I just stumbled across them or a very cheap eBay listing, because they are getting very close, and again, some are in late release territory. So a lot of these are on the uncommon side. Some are also, he sent me some Criterions and some Voyager titles, so I have broken this up a little bit in terms of how I organize them. So I guess what I'll do first is talk about the specific actor or performer themed discs. So he sent me one of these beautiful American Film Institute tribute discs, where they literally took the televised version of the dinner event and put it on a Laserdisc, and most of these have not gotten releases outside of these. So he sent me the one that they did for Lillian Gish in the same type of beautiful sort of bronze cover design with the torn frame and a nice headshot. It's a very nice cover. They have a thick gloss on them. Unfortunately, like a lot of these, this one does have a hole punch, so I guess these must have gotten put on sale at some point or another, but it doesn't detract from the beauty of the cover. And these presentations are really like time capsules for seeing all of the stars who were fortunately still with us at the time, and seeing the guest of honor, in this case Lillian Gish, getting that sort of recognition all these decades later in the 70s and 80s. So these were done by Image. They did a number of these. They are the television broadcast version, and they were obviously photographed on videotape of the time period, so it's got that look baked into it. But again, it's a full time capsule experience. These are still fun to watch, particularly for ones like this that don't get shown or used in documentaries or you see clips of as much. These do have PCM mono, and outside of that, you don't get any extras. You just get the program on two sides of a CLV disc. But they are rather uncommon, and it's really cool that I now have this one along with the Hitchcock one and one or two others. So I think they did about 10 to 15 of these with the same cover design. It's not all of the dinners, unfortunately. Even the modern ones haven't ever been released to disc, I don't think. But it's still a really cool piece. And most of these, like I said, this is really the only video release they've gotten outside of some being used in documentaries or put on modern releases as extra features. But I don't think this one has gotten released again. He also sent me the Kevin Brownlow classic documentary done, I think originally for the BBC in the mid to late 80s for Buster Keaton, entitled A Hard Act to Follow. This is a feature-length documentary. I think it clocks in at about almost 160 minutes. It's in several parts, I believe 3 parts, and it's here on LD. This is a 1989 Image release. It is a 2-disc set with all 3 parts, so this is an extensive feature-length documentary on Keaton's life and career. Definitely the best up to that time, and still probably, it's been a while. I know I've seen this and it's been a while, so I'll be rewatching it on LD. But I think this may still probably be the best overall single documentary series piece on Keaton. But what's great about this, you see the rear, and it's a standard image design. The imagery is great, and this tells you about the three sections of the documentary detailing Keaton's life and career. But you get to the gatefold, and you think image and gatefold, those two things don't go together. So not only does this have a nice light gloss feel to the jacket, which is something you don't get from image, let's just take a look at the gatefold very quickly. Just look at this for a moment. I mean, they saved up. Image did. So I guess if they decided they were going to do a gatefold, well, they sure as heck were going to do a gatefold. This is a beautiful shot of Keaton in this wonderful publicity photo. It is printed across the whole gatefold with a nice high gloss. One of the best looking gatefolds I've ever seen on an LD. I had no idea this had a gatefold when I got it, and I've never seen this in the wild before, so I will have a really fun time revisiting this. It does have PCM. I believe it's probably mono, although this does have a Carl Davis score, so I don't know, it might be stereo, but I'm thinking it's probably mono. But still, this is a wonderful, much higher than average package from a image release, and especially for a documentary, you would think image and their VHS Plus moniker and all that stuff, and their lack of care in making fancy jackets, you wouldn't think they would do one, but I guess they felt this was important enough as it is. So this is a beautifully package release from Image, which is a complete surprise. Then moving on to the Voyager titles, because of course Voyager was, they're not obviously Criterion titles, but they're so closely linked that no Criterion collection is complete without having at least some, if not all, of the Voyager discs. And they themselves are rather uncommon since they were primarily more documentary features and non-narrative, non-fiction titles. But this one is one they did on cinema history. So this is the motion studies of Edward Muybridge. These are the classic Muybridge films presented on a beautiful CLV disc with this lovely artwork. And it's in the traditional simplistic but beautifully presented Voyager style. We get a very Criterion style essay. There is a narration track on the analog track, so as it literally tells you, analog track 1 is silence, and then analog track 2 is narration. So essentially, it's a form of commentary, and what that commentary is actually the words of Muybridge himself being read and dramatized out. So essentially, you're hearing the man's words as you're watching his famous groundbreaking work that really was part of the birth of the moving image, and so I've wanted to get this disc for a while, just never found a affordable copy, or it's just been on my wish list. So I'm very curious to look at the iconic Muybridge films on LD on this presentation, but with the added benefit of the sort of commentary of the man's words overlaid with his work. So I think that's a fascinating idea. This doesn't have a digital track, so it's just literally analog track 1 and 2. And analog track 1, there is no musical accompaniment. The actual credits are here. The essay is quite nice. It is just a single disc, but it's a single-sided disc because, of course, the Muybridge films are extraordinarily short. So when you pull it out, you get the classic dead side of a white plastic side on side 1. So this is just, actually, I think this may be the only release I know of off the top of my head that is a single CAV one-sided disc, and that's all there is. So that's a cool sort of singular identity, I guess. What's the only LD in my collection that's one-sided CAV and nothing else? So that's a cool little piece of this as well, but just a fascinating disc showing that Voyager was really trying to do different things and preserve all kinds of our culture, not just film culture, but when they did, it was something like this, and they really put the extra effort in. The next one is the Voyager disc entitled The Love Goddesses. This is essentially a love letter to the glorious actresses of the silent days and the golden age of Hollywood. of course, with this beautiful glamour shot of Dietrich on the cover, a very high gloss, beautiful jacket. This is a very uncommon Voyager disc. I've never seen one before in person. It's just a single CLV disc that I've never actually seen this before, but I think what it is a sort of mixture of documentary and compilation piece, sort of like the classic MGM That's Entertainment series, where you have all these famous actresses and some of their most famous roles sort of combined together with little documentary bits in between. So this has chapter stops with all the famous names, so they're sort of separated, and you can go to whichever you would wish to enjoy at that particular time. So it's got a lot of chapter stops, but again, just a fascinating looking release. The type of stuff that it would be very much in Voyager's realm as opposed to being a standard Criterion title. Of course, these would be transfers of the time period, and I'm not sure if this has PCM audio. I mean, digital audio does have analog mono, but I think this does have digital mono as well, because this is a 1990 pressing, but it could be wrong. But still, a really beautiful, very striking Voyager release that I am looking forward to spinning up and checking out and seeing what the documentary has in terms of information, and just I think the presentation will match the beautiful jacket design. Then he sent me some beautiful condition Criterion titles as well. This is Spine 84, the 1945 Marcel Carne picture, Children of Paradise, with this beautiful cover art. This has been on my wish list for way too long. You see it pop up every once in a while, but usually, like most nicer 2-disc Criterion releases, it's a little bit pricey. And this does have a rather nice gatefold too. And then here is the rear. There are some pretty substantial extras. The Analog Track 1 program, it's not just a commentary. You get the audio essay by Brian Stonehill, so I guess that's the commentary section. And then you get him doing an interview with Marcel Carne, but also with English translations from the great Laurent Bouzereau. I know I always butcher that pronunciation, so do forgive me. And then it jumps back to the end of the commentary for side 4. So it's one of the few Criterion releases where the analog track is a sort of hybrid of two different things. It's not just a commentary. And then it goes on to say that track 2 is the interview without the translations. So they were nice enough to provide it in both forms. So if you can speak French, you can listen to Analog Track 2. If you can't, like myself and many others here in the States, Analog Track 1 has it translated. This is a CLV transfer, except for the fourth final side is in CAV, and then we go into a full supplemental section with the usual Criterion essay stills and other bits and bobs along with the color bars. So a beautiful Criterion release with a gatefold, with PCM mono, so digital sound, a title I've wanted to get for a while, and a really nice cover. Much nicer when you get it in your hands. It's one of theirs that has that sort of thicker cardstock feel, so it's a lot sturdier. Then comes Spine 154, and really wonderful for me because as a Hitchcock nerd, I feel I have to try and collect every different iteration of the Hitchcock films. So that's their special edition of the classic Blackmail, which was Hitchcock's first all-talkie, although famously it was shot as a silent film first, but this film really pushed the talkie in Great Britain and showed Hitchcock's prowess, and he was pretty much unmatched in the British film industry in terms of his technical capabilities, his ability to then do a sound film in Blackmail and it be ridiculously well made and extraordinarily successful, mimicking a lot of things like what you'd see in American films, as opposed to the much less technically capable at the time British films that were coming out. This is a beautiful image. This is when Criterion had transitioned over into using their classic black bar on the top. We have the red title, so it sort of still looks like their earlier Hitchcock releases, but this one, unlike the earlier ones, does have PCM audio, and it is a special edition, so there are some nice extras, but I really like what they did with the rear cover, where we have the heroine of the film in her moment of murderous intent overlaid on the back. We get the usual nice Criterion essay, black and red on the top. It looks really wonderful. It's a beautiful layout job. And then we get the extras. So they include, we get the classic sound test with Hitchcock and actress Annie Andra, which is one of the iconic sort of joking behind the scenes Hitchcock moments where he's trying to guide her through a sound test and they're sort of playing it up for the camera a little bit. It's something you'll see get used in every Hitchcock documentary. It's just a wonderful little piece. Then we get a segment entitled Directing the Kiss with Hitchcock, Annie Andra, and Cyril Richard, another one of these sort of specifically made about the film pieces at the time. I believe that's what it is. Then we get an entire documentary on the Vitaphone sound system entitled The Voice on the Screen, and Vitaphone, like almost all of the early sound or sound on disc systems at the dawn of the talkie, it wasn't exactly what you think of in terms of sound film. There were some technical limitations involved, and the actual process was very difficult. So that's a fascinating inclusion. I don't know if it's something more modern, or I think it was something done kind of around the time period. So one of the little short subjects that would play in front of a film, because I think I've seen this before under that title, and it's something like that, but I could be wrong. Then we get an audio commentary with the screenwriter Charles Bennett, who is one of Hitchcock's key collaborators at this time period in his British films. And then that is narrated by producer-screenwriter Stuart Birnbaum. Then the essay itself is written by Laurent Bouzereau again. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing that, which I probably am. But this is one of the few Criterion Hitchcocks I didn't have yet on LD, and it is definitely the spiffiest and fanciest of their releases of his classic British films, because most of them were very early releases or in the original lineup, so they never got a real upgrade until they were done on DVD, like The Lady Vanishes and The 39 Steps. Some, like 39 Steps, to get digital sound eventually, but this is the one where, because it's 1992, it got a full-blown special edition. It is just single disc CLV with PCM audio. This is, of course, the talkie version. The silent version would not get a real proper official disc release until much later. Currently there is a German version, and then there's the Kino Lorber Blu-ray, but that has some unfortunate aspect ratio issues. But the silent version is just as important as the sound version. I do want to stress that. So if you've never seen the silent version and you're a Hitchcock fan, you must see it. It is a real, is an extraordinarily interesting comparison to make, even if you watch them back to back. But the sound version is the one that was most groundbreaking and the one that history really remembers. But some claim the silent version is just as good, if not better. I just think it's a shame the silent version kind of got buried a bit. But in any case, I'm really happy to finally have the Criterion Special Edition Laserdisc, and I'm very curious to look at the transfer, so I'll be spinning this up very soon. He also sent me Spine 169, which is Criterion's Special Edition of the, I think the best word to describe the experience, The Man Who Fell to Earth, the 1976 Nicholas Roeg picture that is literally the David Bowie experience of the 70s. A lot, actually a great deal of the DNA of this film went right into Bowie's Station to Station album, which was originally supposed to be the sort of soundtrack to this film, but eventually became a studio album. If you've never seen this film, just go in cold and watch it. It's a film to be experienced. It is very much what you would probably term an art film and is not for everyone, but it is nonetheless a true experience, whether you can follow the little thread of narrative that runs through the film or you just sort of go with it. I think that's kind of what you have to do. You have to go with it and experience the film. It is incredibly powerful, and it's one that definitely stays with you and requires multiple viewings. I really love what they did with the cover, even though it's very simple. It sort of gives you that sort of looking behind the obvious and existentialism that literally is the spirit of the film. So it's a perfect image choice, even if it isn't as striking as one covers that would come later. What's also excellent, this has a beautiful gatefold full of lovely stills. And what's even better is that if you look at the actual chapter listings, there are little asterisks. And what those mean, it denotes which chapters have material that was either altered or deleted from the theatrical release prints, because this film was heavily cut on its various releases and on its previous video versions. So getting it in its complete form, uncut, with the original soundtrack, was very major. So even though this is the old letterbox Laserdisc transfer, this at the time was the best film, the best experience you could ever have with the film, because again, this was the first time you could see it uncut and in the original aspect ratio. And in fact, that is actually credited in the about the transfer notes, where it literally says this is the first uncut widescreen presentation on any home video format in the United States. The special features are rather extensive. There is a new audio commentary with Nicholas Roeg, including Bowie himself and Buck Henry, who co-stars in the film. Hundreds of production photos, drawings, and snapshots on the set in the very extensive stills section. Then there are deleted scenes and alternate versions of key scenes with analysis of photos, screenplay segments, and excerpts from the original continuity shooting script. Then, in addition to that, we get the original trailer, the teaser trailers for both the American and British release, and the original television spot. The technical notes say the transfer was made in the original ratio of 2.35 to 1, made from a CRI print master and a 35mm print, and it's stereo magnetic tracks. So the audio is stereo. It is not matrix encoded. This is coming out right at the time where Dolby Stereo actually really got off the ground with the 76 version of A Star Is Born. So I guess this would have been released in both mono and stereo originally, depending on where you saw it and what the prints were like. So apparently this was originally mixed in stereo. So this is a stereo presentation. Most modern releases are a 5.1 remix. Really beautiful rear cover, lovely, as usual, Criterion essay. And as you can tell, this was at the time where Criterion had really stepped up their game in the art design and department. The film is actually presented in 3 sides are CAV. Sides 1, 2, and 4 are full CAV, and then it's side 3 that's CLV. So that's something Criterion would do when possible and give you as much in CAV. I guess if they had done full CAV, that would have added probably another disc or two, and that would have made this a trifold, but it's still a beautiful release, mostly CAV with a stuffed supplemental section. And it's a disc that doesn't pop up all the time. Of course, the Criterion Blu-ray is famously out of print and goes for top dollar, but there is a 4K master out there, and that has gotten a release overseas. I don't know if Criterion is going to ever get the rights to this again, but if you were looking for a really cool Criterion edition to have, I think the Laserdisc is a really great choice and has a wonderful presentation with extras and art, and definitely, even though it's a bit pricey, will still cost you less than the out-of-print Blu-ray. He also sent me Spine 222, which is Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev. This was the reconstruction of the original 205-minute director's cut, the full-length version of the film with brand new subtitles, which was a major jump forward for this film, which had a whole history of problems in terms of release edits and subtitling problems. A lot of older versions were missing significant amounts of footage and subtitles, so getting the film complete in widescreen with proper subtitles was a major victory. So this is really, as far as I know, the first proper presentation on video here in the US, and it has this absolutely beyond striking jacket artwork. This was ported over for a Criterion DVD. This is still a film that could definitely knock your socks off if it ever got a modern scan and a Blu-ray or 4K release. This has a wonderful gatefold with the Criterion essay and then the key events in Russian history on top, but overlaid over a sort of map design. This does make me think design-wise a little bit. It reminds me of the Criterion LC gatefold, which makes sense because they're both from when Criterion had really made their artwork much more complicated and complex, I should say, over their earlier jackets. And then here is the rear cover. So again, this is in widescreen with digital audio. It does have a supplemental section, and the film is full CLV because, of course, it is 205 minutes and it's not a gigantic box. So obviously it's CLV across 4 sides. The extras include U.S. premiere of the 205-minute director's cut, talks about the new transfer, talks about being completely retranslated and electronically subtitled, restoring 40% of the film's dialogue for the first time, analysis of a key scene in each of the 7 sections of the film, and then a rear interview with Tarkovsky, together with a general essay on his work. So again, that's part of the supplemental on-screen sections. So this is the Criterion release of Enter Rublev, the first truly good release of the film on video that I'm aware of, at least here in the US. And still a pretty solid way to watch it if you don't have the DVD, which I assume is based on this master. So this is one I've wanted to get for a long time. And again, it's just an extraordinarily strikingly beautiful Laserdisc jacket. Then there's Spine 229, which is Spike Lee's first feature. She's Gotta Have It from 1986. This is a beautiful, again, very striking Criterion jacket. One of the ones that is definitely very striking and very frameable. They were really nailing their art designs at this time period. It's just a single CLV disc, but it is a special edition. So you get the wonderful Criterion essay plus the full features breakdown. They include the presentation of the unrated director's cut, featuring material censored from the original theatrical release, commentary by Spike Lee, cinematographer Ernest Dickerson, sound designer Barry Brown, and production supervisor Monty Ross, a scene deleted from the final cut, in addition to outtakes, the original trailer, the music video, a stills photo gallery with a commentary by Spike Lee's brother, the unit photographer David Lee, plus still photos of various props and memorabilia, and then some original Nike ads with Spike Lee and Michael Jordan. So it is a pretty stuffed supplemental section. This was, I believe, all ported over to when Criterion did their DVD of this, but it's still a really striking LD jacket. It is widescreen in the 1.66:1 ratio. It does have digital sound, but I'm not sure if this is mono or stereo. It's been a very long time since I've seen this, so it'll be fun to revisit it on the Criterion Special Edition. So now we move on to all the other discs, and as usual, I go through these in chronological order, but this one, since there's so many classic silents, I get to go way further back than I usually do. And starting with this one, which is a very uncommon disc, and itself a late release from a restoration around this time period. So this is of the very important feature film, the Danish feature film, I should say, from 1913. This is Atlantis from the Blackhawk Films restoration on this beautiful release from Image. This is a 1998 pressing, making it very much a late release. And, of course, it has a fancier jacket, as Image would do around this time. I've only seen pieces of this film, like various clips, and I've seen some of it used in a documentary before, so I've never gotten to see the whole thing, and I'm very much excited to finally see this. We even get technical notes about the restoration. So this edition was restored by Marguerite Ingberg, who used the original camera negative. It was digitally mastered at 20.5 frames per second from a fine grain print. The music was arranged and performed by Robert Israel with a brand new score, and the release was produced by David Shepard for Blackhawk Films. So that's why it has a digital stereo soundtrack. So I'm very excited to check this out. And as far as I know, this is still a very solid, if not one of the better ways to see this film. And again, being a 1998 release of a silent film from Image, is a very uncommon disc, and one I had seen on the LDDB, but never thought I would come across. Next is, of course, the 1920 classic, the John Barrymore version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is the special edition, again, the Blackhawk Films version released by Image. This is a lovely Image release from the 90s, really nice gloss on the jacket, and I believe when this was put out on DVD by Kino, I think they used this master, the Blackhawk Films version. We get a lovely write-up and essay. It does have some extras. It includes the shooting script of the film, and really importantly, includes segments of the 1911 version of Jekyll and Hyde with James Cruise. So you get a little section of that, which is also color timed, included at the end of side 2. The Barrymore version of Jekyll and Hyde, while it is a silent, it is still an incredible watch and still one of the great filmed versions of the story, along with the 1931 Mamoulian Frederick March version. That's probably the most famous. Then the 1941 Victor Fleming Spencer Tracy version, and the various other attempts that have happened, such as the Hammer Films Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll. But this is still one of the great versions of the story, with one of Barrymore's greatest film performances, and it's a must-see for Barrymore fans, for Jekyll and Hyde fans, of course, and for fans of the silent cinema. So it's really cool to have it on this Laserdisc edition, and I can't wait to spin it up and check out the master on this LD. I should also mention the transfer is color-timed, and it carries a PCM digital version of the Gaylord Carter organ score. Next is the 1920 silent version of The Last of the Mohicans, which is regarded as one of the most accurate adaptations in terms of all the film versions. This is a beautiful, gorgeous jacket. This is a LumaVision release from the George Eastman House restoration. It's a wonderful single-disc CLV presentation with CLV and CAV sides. It doesn't say who did the score, but it does say the score is in stereo. It was co-directed by Maurice Tourneur and Clarence Brown. Tourneur, of course, was the father of Jacques Tourneur, who followed in his father's footsteps and became one of the greatest directors of all time, with Cat People, Night of the Demon, Out of the Past, and many other masterpieces. His father had a great career in France, came over to Hollywood, and then eventually wound up going back to France. But I've wanted to see this for a very long time. This version stars Wallace Beery, and again, it is regarded as perhaps the most accurate to the original novel in terms of the adaptations. Also, apparently, I know Boris Karloff is supposed to have a small bit part in this as well somewhere. But this is, again, single disc, side 1 CLV, side 2 CAV, but it's just a really impressive jacket. I mean, just look at that. That's absolutely beautiful. Next, also from 1920, from the Silent Classics series, this is the release of Pollyanna, the Mary Pickford version, again, with the usual lovely Silent Classics cover that Image was doing with these releases. This does have digital sound with a newly recorded for this release Gaylord Carter organ score. These releases are really handsome. I never thought that I might need to start looking at these because, of course, a lot of these films have more modern restorations, but not all of them. And since I've gotten a few, now including this one, they're so impressive that I kind of want to get the rest and look at them. Really lovely artwork, a nice glossy sleeve, really lovely images, and I'm very curious to check out the transfer on this. I've seen this once before a long, long time ago, I think maybe on one of the old TCM Sunday Night Silent programs, but very curious to return to it. Next, from Republic and landmark Laservision, this is the 1921 Peck's Bad Boy, which is a comedy feature for Jackie Coogan after he had done The Kid famously the year before with Chaplin. So this is a 1921 feature, and this was actually directed by Sam Wood, interestingly, who went on to a very successful Hollywood career, directing many different kinds of films in the studio era, but this is a very nice-looking release for a silent title, and again, this is technically under Republic, which is really interesting because I didn't know that they had done a lot of silence, so this is another one that I am very much excited to check out. It doesn't really indicate it on the jacket, but it is in the text. This does have a digital stereo audio track, but I'm not sure who may have done the score. It doesn't credit it. It does credit that this is from the Killiam collection, so I guess this will be equivalent to some of the Killiam classic Laserdiscs that I have of silence from their collection. Next, we get another Black Hawk restoration on a beautiful late release, very uncommon image disc. This one is easily the fanciest packaging of these. So this is for Tolerable David, directed by Henry King, and it's sort of a modern updating of the David and Goliath story with a sort of Western background, at least as far as I understand it. I've never gotten to see this film, so this will be a first-time watch for me. But this is a beautiful, extremely high-gloss gatefold, where the gatefold has a very extensive essay about the film and Henry King, who went on to an illustrious career as a director, and then lovely stills, technical information, and even though it's a single CLV disc, it actually has a supplement at the end, which is David Shepard, who produced this release. It's got an interview he did with Henry King in 1977 that runs about 16 minutes. So that's a pretty substantial supplement to have at the end of this. So this is a really nice special edition. And again, it's 1998, so it is very much a late release from Image, and really amazing they were doing these fancy presentations of silent films that were more on the obscure side at the tail end of the format. We do get the technical notes that the film is presented at the visually correct speed of 20 frames per second, is digitally mastered and electronically conflated from 2 original 35mm nitrate release prints and a 35mm duplicate negative. Robert Israel's score is performed under his direction by a small orchestra, as such as might have been heard when the film was performed theatrically in the 1920s. Some of the source material exhibits surface scratches, but we thought it was best to accept them in order to retain maximum photographic quality, which is something you were especially going to run into trying to restore silent films at this time period. So again, this is a incredible package for a silent film from Image, and again, a one of these really fantastic silent film late releases they were doing on Laserdisc. So I cannot wait to check this out. And again, just a real surprise in terms of how intricate the packaging is. Slightly earlier in 1996, Image had also done a newer Blackhawk Films restoration of the 1925 D.W. Griffith film starring W.C. Fields, Sally of the Sawdust, again with a beautiful jacket image with a very glossy sleeve. It's just a single CLV disc, but it's a beautiful presentation and showing you what they were really doing with their silent film releases and really stepping up their game with these, even though people were already jumping ship over to DVD. This is later on in Griffith's career, and most people don't realize that Fields made a silent film directed by Griffith, and it was a comedy. So this is something I saw a very long time ago, so I'm very excited to come back to it. The score is in digital stereo and is credited as adapted from the original 1925 cue sheet, so it is the original score, just a modern performance. And this was produced by David Shepard, and it's a Blackhawk Films title. So very much looking forward to checking this out on this wonderful mid to late 90s Image presentation. But again, this is just a very gorgeous frameable jacket. Next is another later Image release of a Blackhawk Films David Shepard produced restoration, the immortal 1927 Pollyanna directed The Cat and the Canary, the film that inspired so many other films and genres that they all kind of sort of feel like ripoffs, and a key film influence on James Whale, especially in The Old Dark House, among other films. This is one of the key essential silent films for any newcomer to silence. When you see it, you feel like you've seen it before due to just how many times it's been ripped off and lifted from. It's still a joy to come back to. And this is a beautiful Image jacket that's full of whimsical humor. I especially love the cats on the sides. I believe when Kino did their first DVD years and years ago, I think it was from this same restoration master, but I could be wrong. Unfortunately, this has not gotten a modern restoration in Blu-ray. I keep hoping that it does, but until then, I can't wait to look at it again on this Laserdisc release. This does have a version of the original score, the original 1927 score in digital stereo, and is a nice bonus in addition to the wonderful essay and the restored color-tinted version of the film. It does include a Harold Lloyd short entitled Haunted Spooks at the end that runs about 22 minutes. So you get an additional Harold Lloyd short tucked in as a bonus to what is one of the key silent films. So I can't wait to revisit The Cat and the Canary on this beautiful release. And this disc is from 1997, so it is in late release territory. So it's something you don't stumble across very often. So I'm very happy to have this. And then last for the silence, the 1929 release of The Taming of the Shrew, classic Shakespeare material, and the first major pairing between famous real-life couple Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, so uniting the two great stars of the silent era in a Shakespeare adaptation. This is, it's got a color-tinted image on the front, but the actual film is in black and white. This is an image release. It does carry a digital soundtrack, but I don't think it credits who did the score. But it also includes a documentary piece entitled "The Birth of a Legend." So I guess that's about Fairbanks Pickford, Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, and the formation of United Artists. This is another image release with the Mary Pickford Company logo as well. And I'm very curious to check this out. I've never gotten to see this in its entirety, so I will get to enjoy it on LD for the first time and check out the transfer. Next, I've got some RKO Classic Collection discs. The first is the 1930 Hook, Line, and Sinker, pairing together once again Burt Wheeler and Robert Woolsey in another of the really interesting comedy vehicles they were doing at this time in the early talkies. There are some like I believe it's Kentucky Colonel's got the Warner Archive Blu-ray release, but I've only seen one or two of these, so this is something I'm very much excited to finally see. I am working on trying to get all the various RKO titles because a lot of them, like this, are more on the obscure side, and some have never even gotten a DVD release, so it is important to collect these, even though they are otherwise just plain image discs. It's just the cover that makes them look fancy. It does have PCM mono. That's another nice thing about these. They all have digital sound, and they all have the RKO Classic Collection cover and logo design. Next is their 1933 vehicle, Diplomaniacs, again in the Classic Collection with PCM mono digital sound and the standard image RKO cover. And then their 1934 vehicle, Hips, Hips, Hooray. Funny enough title. So I guess I'll be doing a little triple bill of these. Again, in the RKO Classic Collection banner with a PCM mono soundtrack. Next is the 1936 film, The Ex Mrs. Bradford with William Powell and Jean Arthur. This is a film I've wanted to revisit for way too long, so now I'm very excited to check it out on the RKO Classic Edition. Essentially, this is sort of a spin-off of the success of the immortal 1934 The Thin Man, where Powell was immortalized on screen with Myrna Loy in the first of the 6 films. But there were some other films made by other studios, including and especially this one, that is very obviously trying to cash in on that success. So Powell is playing a part very similar in terms of the character and the sort of story and setup, and his relationship with the Arthur character is very similar to the Thin Man. So if you ever wanted more Thin Man in the 30s, there's this film and a couple others that try to do that sort of thing. So this is a film I've wanted to revisit for a very long time. This has, again, PCM mono, no extras, but we do actually get chapter stops on the jacket, which didn't always happen on these. But I'm very excited to finally revisit this on the LD. Then he sent me a Tai Seng release. So this is I believe it's a Hong Kong import. This is for the film Executioners, which I have never seen, and I am now very excited to check this out. Anytime I get to see a Hong Kong film, especially when it's actually in a good enough transfer with proper English subtitles, as this has digital sound. It's credited as bilingual, but I believe this is supposed to be fully subtitled with English subs. It does have digital mono, and it's just another lovely Tai Seng release with a lot of images. But I don't know too much about this film, so I'm just going to be going in blind and watching it for the first time, as I've done with a couple Hong Kong films when I've found just stumbled across the LD releases. So this was just a nice surprise. And then lastly, for the single disc is 1993's The Music of Chance, and this deluxe widescreen presentation. This is a film I've read of, but I've never actually gotten to see, and I'm, of course, a big fan of both James Spader and Mandy Patinkin as well, so it just seemed too interesting, and I've just sort of had it on my radar, but never actually seen it. This is actually a Columbia TriStar release, so it's got the usual rather nice Sony write-up essay, nice background for the rear cover. It's got Dolby Surround encoded PCM, and it is in widescreen. But of course, being a Sony disc, you always have to wonder, will this have DADC rot issues? I guess I should look this up on the database. I hadn't checked it yet, so I'm not sure. But usually, if you haven't heard about it, I've had good luck with not having that issue. But anytime it's a Sony disc, you have to wonder before you put it in, hey, will I be able to, is this going to have rot or not? And then he sent me 2 box sets as well. So This is the first MGM release of the classic R Gang comedies. With 19 original shorts included in their traditional box style. And then all the information is printed on the back instead of having an insert. But these do have PCM mono, and it was the first major presentation for all the shorts in terms of getting an official fancier box set release and I guess newer transfer scans at the time. The shorts are spread across 6 sides, all CLV, I believe, and it's in the traditional MGM box set style. He also sent me the Volume 4 release of the Little Rascals shorts themselves. This was part of the original remastering program, and this is in a lovely box with the sort of attached hinge design. This has 16 shorts spread across 6 sides and does include a Leonard Maltin intro. Actually, I think it's got several little bits of him talking about the shorts spread throughout the whole program. But it's a really nice set, and of course from Image. I don't remember off the top of my head how many boxes they did, but this was at least an attempt at the time to restore and remaster the shorts. Currently, they are being worked on and done in beautiful new Blu-ray volumes by the Classic Flicks label. I think they're going to eventually do a complete box set, but if you're interested in the shorts and you want to see a modern restoration, you can definitely look at the Classic Flicks releases, but these Laserdisc boxes are still a really nice treat in order to look at and look at a fancy box set presentation of the shorts. And then last but not least, he had a few more discs that he added that he unfortunately didn't have the original boxes for, but these are from very uncommon later release sets, and I'm just very excited to check these out because I'm curious what the transfers are like, and they're also from Blackhawk Films restorations. So these first couple are from the very late release 1997, 1998 Cecil B. DeMille sets. So this is from the first one. These are all from Image. So do forgive the glare, but this is of the silent version of Carmen that he did. These have digital soundtracks, and of course, these are just various discs from the box sets. So if you're interested in these, when you look these up on the database, again, this box set is from 1997 and is the first of several, or at least 2 or 3 DeMille sets they did. So just by having the loose disc, because they have shorter run times, I did get a couple features on these, but of course they're without the box. I just have some sleeves with loose discs in them. And then the others are from the volumes of the 1998 box sets entitled In the Beginning, Film Comedy Pioneers of and essentially the sets are known as the Slapstick Encyclopedia. So the labels look like this, as most Image box sets do. These were all restored by Blackhawk Films, but these are all classics of the silent comedy, and including various shorts and features and things. There are several volumes, so this is essentially a sort of mix of discs, unfortunately loose, but still originally from these box sets. I believe there were 3 volumes overall, and they're all 1998, 1999, so they are very much late releases and very uncommon. So unfortunately, I only have random discs from these that survived, but it was still a really nice inclusion because the sets themselves are very rare, and at least this way I can check out a number of these films and hope maybe one day I could find the whole boxes to supplement these and finally complete the set. So that's it for this collection update. And again, all thanks to Michael Smith for sending me an email and asking me if I wanted any of his Laserdisc collection he was parting out. So many thanks to him. These are some wonderful titles in great condition, and it was just a really nice gesture. And of course, if anybody has classics or silence and if they wonder if I'd like them, well, of course it's me, of course. So I was very happy to add these to my collection, and I can't wait to spend through all of these and really look at some of these older transfers, because I love looking at older restorations as much as I do modern restorations. I find it fascinating, and a lot of these silent films, not all of them have gotten modern restorations. So some of these the sometimes the old Laserdisc presentation can actually be one of the better options to see the film anyway. And of course, they have the various different scores, and some scores are better than others. So it is a fun and important hobby to collect not just silent films, but older releases of silent films for the different prints, different restorations, different scores, varying frame rates and presentations. There's a lot of different reasons why it's important to look at older releases of silent films. So, as usual, I hope this has been fun and at least somewhat informative listening to me babble about classic films in silence. Hopefully, this encourages you to check out more silence on Laserdisc and more classic films, or dust some stuff off the shelf that you've been meaning to watch and haven't gotten around to, or just had in your to watch pile and never got to, or stuff you haven't watched in a long time. It's fun to just pull something at random off the shelf if you haven't watched it in a couple years and just try it again and have a fresh experience with it. So happy Laserdisc watching, happy Laserdisc hunting, keep your disc spinning, keep your players alive, and thanks ever so much for watching.